Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Ralph World. I am Mac, and with me, as always, is
Uncle Britt.
And if you're watching this on YouTube, not just listening on Spotify, you may notice that there is a third being on this couch. Would you care to do the introduction?
This is my puppy dog, Pepperoni. My roommate is out today, so we have a special guest with us for this particular episode. But Pepper is going to be quiet and not at all interrupt what we're talking about.
And she would not calm down until we let her up on the couch, so she has decided to join us. And what we are talking about today, I'm not even really sure how to quantify it or how to explain it, but it was just something that sort of came across in our conversations, Uncle Britt and I, about just how we consume media. And partially this conversation came out of our media literacy episode. Part of this conversation came out of when we were just talking about the first time I saw The Crow in the theaters back in '94. By the way, time of recording, last week we did go see The Crow '94 in the theaters again. It was the second time in theaters for me. It was the second time for Uncle Britt total. And I loved it. It was an experience that I know I'm not going to get to see it in the theaters again after this. So I was very thankful for that.
It was quite cool, honestly. There were some scenes that you could just see a lot more detail of on the big screen, and you really get a better feel for some of the more grandiose aspects of it. So it really was interesting. And it was the first time I've ever seen any movie re-released, actually.
Oh, really? On the big screen?
Yeah, I've only ever seen, for lack of a better description, fresh movies at the theater.
Yeah, and then you see them again on streaming or video on demand, which is what leads us into our topic. When we watched The Crow for the first time, he and I together, it was the first time that he saw it. It was when I got the 4K Steel... No, we got it off of... It was before I got the Steelbook. We got it off of video on demand. And he hadn't seen it before. He thought it was a particular type of movie. I said, no, it's not that movie. I think you'll like it. And for the most part, you liked it, right? Yeah.
I don't have many complaints. It's very much a product of its time. Like, it is a 90s movie, but that's not a bad thing. It is just, it has a very specific feel about it, and it sticks to it even, 20, 30 years later?
30 years, yeah. This is the 30-year mark this year. And he and I have watched many movies together, and he noted that I was different watching this one than watching the other ones. There was at one point he had asked a question during the movie, and I almost told him to shut up.
We normally have a pretty open running dialogue when we watch movies. Usually older movies we'll talk through it. New movies we kind of pay a little more attention if neither one of us have seen it. But yeah, this was one of those times that I opened my mouth and he almost just backhanded me without even looking. Like it was almost disrespectful.
But this led into talking about how the movie affected me, how it changed my life, like what I took from it, how it even influences me now when I direct shows on stage. And I was telling him about remembering the first time I saw it in the theater, sitting in the theater with my friends in high school, that it was released basically now, like in the summertime. So, back in the 90s, if you were around then, the air conditioner was either on or it wasn't. And so we're sitting in that theater and they have the air conditioner on and it was cold in there. And it was just adding to the whole feel, the whole vibe of getting to watch the movie because, that movie takes place predominantly in the rain before, like the night before Halloween. So it helps set the entire atmosphere. And that was when we both kind of realized that we don't have that experience anymore where we're so immersed in a movie or a TV show or even a song when we're listening to it that we just block out everything because The Crow isn't the only one, and I don't think I told you this, but The Crow isn't the only one that I can remember like that. I can remember sitting in my bedroom watching MTV and seeing the video for Smells Like Teen Spirit for the first time. And that was also the first time that I had heard the song. And they made this big deal, it was like when Kurt Loder was like, hey, coming up now, the premiere. And I remember sitting in my bedroom, watching TV, listening to this song, watching the video. And I'm not saying I predicted that it was going to change the world, but I knew I was watching something new. I knew I was watching something different. And I can still remember being immersed in it and sitting there and watching it and it just drawing me in. And that leads us to the topic of conversation, which is I feel like we don't have those experiences anymore, no matter what the generation is. And that leads us into our topic of conversation today that, like I said, I don't really know how to quantify it or like how to, I don't even know how to like type out the topic of this episode, but I feel like our consumption of media, not just like in relation to like the media literacy episode that we did, but the way that we consume media has affected the way we remember things. Because back in '94, when we sat there and we watched The Crow, we were high school kids that was on a very strict budget. And we knew that was the only time we were going to get to see the movie. So you sit there and you absorb it and you just take everything in because you're committing it to memory. And how good a movie is dictated to us, like how much we remembered of it. And this kind of goes into, this just hit me that this may also lead into the topic of why people from a certain generation, mine, whenever like old properties are revisited, it's because we have such strong memories and emotions of seeing that for the first time. And now those are being, I don't want to say altered, because like I never agreed with the argument that like, oh, this new thing is ruining my memory. No, it's not. Your memories are your memories. That's another topic. Let's get back on track of, but now, thank you. Now, when we see something, we know, like even if we go and see it in the theater, we know in 6 weeks it's going to be on video on demand. We know in 2 months it's going to be on streaming. If it's a TV show, we know we're going to be able to binge the entire season of that. That it's kind of like the same phenomenon my generation had when cell phones started taking place of our memory of phone numbers. When I was 12 years old, I remembered the phone number for my house, my dad's work, my mom's work, my grandmother, the neighbor's house in case of an emergency, and like my 3 or 4 best friends. And those were the ones that I could recite without thinking about it. And then there was like these other phone numbers that you kind of remembered, and now, and I don't think this is just me being older, like I'm lucky I remember my dad's phone number, he lives at the house I grew up in, and mine. Because the cell phone is basically our pocket phone book. And if we don't have a number in our directory, it's only a Google search away. And I don't think that is, like I said, just because I'm getting older, because I'm willing to bet you, being like 20 years younger, are the same way, because you don't have to remember it.
I remember I had to know my house phone number.
Right.
And then I had to memorize my mother's cell phone number.
Okay.
Those are the only 2 that I ever had to memorize. But then once I got a phone in the 9th grade, it didn't matter. I didn't need to know any other number. And so much to the point that there are people that don't know their own phone number.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to know that either. You can just share a contact now.
Or somebody will just like send a text over and all of the information, like the number will be there, and then you just save it as a contact that way. No, I get that. And I think the same thing is happening to the way that we view movies, watch TV, listen to songs, that like we don't let ourselves become immersed in it. We don't let ourselves experience it, because we know we're just going to be able to turn around and watch it again. Like, there was a movie, and the movie I did this with is kind of ridiculous, but there was a point like 8 years ago that for like 3 months straight, I watched Nicolas Cage's Gone in 60 Seconds every day.
Why?
Because it was a movie about cars with Nicolas Cage and Angelina Jolie. Did I need any other excuse?
I'll give you that. I'll give you that. Not his finest work.
It was mostly the cars and Angelina Jolie.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that. Nick is an attractive man, so I understand wanting to ogle at him a little bit.
But, like, that's what I mean. Like, when I was a kid, we wouldn't have been able to do that. Like, we went to the movies, we watched it, we knew this was the only time we were going to get to see it, because even if in 2 weeks we got more money together to go to the theater, because the theater going experience was so rare and pretty much took up all of the money that we saved up before we got jobs, we didn't go see movies multiple times, like, because, like, okay, that was great, but now I want to see something different. You know what I mean? If we were lucky, in a year and a half, 2 years, it would be on HBO. But there was not even any guarantee of that. But even when these things came out on like VHS home video, like VHS tapes, it wasn't like buying like DVDs or Blu-rays now where, like, you know, you can pick one up for like $20 to $40. Like, VHS tapes were stupidly expensive at the time. Like, they were very much a luxury item that when at the height of like the family like home video collection, you could keep the entire thing in like a drawer because of how much money, how expensive they were, and sometimes just how hard they were to find. And like a VHS back then, I think if I'm remembering correctly, did run like 30 to 40 bucks, but that much back in the 80s was a lot more money than it is now. So like I said, we had to just remember, immerse ourselves, and just like absorb everything that we saw. And I've noticed that, like, even unless it's something we're going to talk about on this podcast, like when we watch The Flash or Black Adam,
Yeah.
like, and you're mentally taking notes because you want to talk about it in this, but like, and Dune 1 and 2, I just completely absorbed too. But like other movies that I've seen recently, I don't want to say it's in and out, it's there and then it's gone, but I don't remember the experience the way that I have in previous years, and not just my teenage years, like up into like my 30s or something. Like, what's it feel like for you?
I think it really just comes down to the whole binge culture. Like, you're talking about the movie theater experience. To me, I relate to all of this more with TV shows.
Okay.
Same concept, but just in a show form. And this is actually part of the reason why I wanted to talk in this episode about, like, I just don't retain the shows as much as I think I do. Let me try to rephrase that.
Right on.
I don't retain the shows as much as I thought I did when I was watching them. Because there's a lot of times that I'll watch a show and I'll rave about it for a couple days because I just watched it, whatever.
Right.
And then give it a couple months, and if someone, like a friend, picks it up at that point, and they start talking to me about it, and I'm like, yeah, those characters sure did those things. But it's like, well, you don't remember? No, I remember what happened, but I don't remember like any of the fine details of it. It's almost like oh yeah, I remember Vader is Luke's father. Do you remember where that happens? They were fighting. Like I remember the plot. I don't remember all the theatrics to it. And I'm using Star Wars as an example, but it really can be anything. We like recently watched Blue Eye Samurai.
Right.
I tried really hard to pay attention to that show, but flip it with the shows that I'm watching independently, just like by myself. Half the time I'm putting that stuff on and then I'm just letting it run through an entire season in a day. And while I might pay attention to the 5 out of the 10 episodes, the other 5 I'm probably looking at my phone, letting Pepper out, going to grab something from the kitchen. I'm just not actively watching these things the way I thought I did, or the way I used to watch things. And I think part of it is oversaturation of the market. Just that thought in my head, well, I can watch this, there's something else I can watch after it. Like, it's almost, I can fill my time with anything, so anything will do.
And I can relate to that, because there was something else that we talked about that I experienced something very similar to you. We talked about when I binge watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, the anime. And
I'm laughing because of his complete forgetfulness.
I have completely blanked out Jet.
Completely rewrote episode plots to remove the character.
Yeah, seriously, I have completely blanked out Jet. And I really feel like a lot of my non-retention of the original series, remembering events but maybe not remembering names of these characters, where like you remember them, but you were watching it from week to week, and I watched the entire 3 seasons in a weekend, in a long weekend, basically. And it got to the point, like in the beginning I was drawn in and I can remember things from like the first book, but then like up to, as Uncle Iroh said in the remake, his wrath moment, like after that, it all blended together for me, because it got to a point where I felt like I was just watching one episode to get to the next episode, which is why I was really glad that when we watched Blue Eye and when we watched the live action Avatar, we purposely stopped watching at certain points. Like we would watch 2 or 3 episodes at a time, then walk away from it, give it a week, then go back and watch. And I feel like we did retain those 2, especially Blue Eye, better than when we've watched shows like how Netflix will just release an entire series at once.
Great example, bringing up Netflix, Wednesday.
Yeah.
I watched that show.
Don't remember a thing about it.
At all.
Yeah.
Like, I can tell you the characters, and I can tell you, oh, she's friends with the blonde roommate, and then they fight, and then they get back together. If you ask me any deeper questions, I don't know what they fought about. I don't know when they got back together. I couldn't even tell you if their split happened in the beginning of the season or the end of the season, or in the middle, I guess. But, like, I can't even remember... And I don't know if this says more about me than what we're talking about, but I can't even remember if I walked away thinking like, oh, that was an overwhelmingly good show. I remember I was positive towards it, but that in and of itself does not say much.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't even tell you like a standout performance that I thought was really good, or a specific scene that I was like, wow, this is really what this show is about. I just remember watching it and being done with it and being like, season 2's coming.
Well, and I think that leads into like another issue about the way we retain. And once again, this is more TV shows than movies, that we can watch something and we may not let ourselves get involved, get invested in it, because with the nature of streaming these days, nothing is guaranteed a second season.
Yeah.
Like, I watched Arcane, and that first season was really good. But when the first season was over, I was done with it, because I was partially convinced that for some reason Netflix wasn't going to do a second season. Now here we are, like, 2-3 years later, and the second season is finally coming out this November. Like, that's, like, I think that's another reason why you lose investment in TV shows, because... The seasons aren't coming out while the memory is still fresh, while the desire to see it is still hot. Like, I know we're going to have to wait for season 2, for book 2 of Avatar: The Last Airbender, but that's why I'm really excited and really happy that they greenlit seasons 2 and 3 together, so that there will just be, ideally, just that 1 year between them, so that, like, when the second book is done... you don't want to go right into the third one. You want that anticipation to build up, but at least you know it's coming. That's why I was also very happy that, like, before we finished watching Blue Eye, and now granted, I had already watched the entire show, but when we watched it, I think it was midway through our watch through that they announced that the second season had been greenlit. So that by the time you got to the end of it, we knew there was going to be a continuation of that story. But things like Arcane, things like Wednesday, like those shows honestly could go either way. Either because Netflix just doesn't greenlight it, the interest isn't there, or there's too much of a weight that people in the production side of it just go on to other things. And I think that does stop us from letting ourselves become invested in these characters and these stories because we just don't know.
I also think there's the flip side to it too, in the whole like MCU-esque era that we're in now, of, well, you might start watching something and you might have that thought of like, well, I don't know if there's going to be a season 2, I don't know if there's going to be a follow-up. You have the flip side of it of like, you start something and then you also kind of have that fear of, do I need to watch 15 other shows to understand this?
That's very true too. Do I need to do homework
Yeah.
to go watch a movie that's coming out in like 2 months?
And it's not just comic book movies. Like I actually literally just read about this yesterday. They're making a Beatles Universal or universe movie.
Oh, this is the stupidest. I know what you're going to say. This is the stupidest idea I've ever heard.
Each Beatle is getting its own movie.
Its own biopic.
Yeah, for them to like come together to make a Beatles movie.
It's like Beatles Assemble.
So you're telling me, like, plot-wise, the story has to be the same across 4 different movies?
Well, aren't they doing like the individuals and their own journeys to become the Beatles, and then like... So my question is each movie going to end with them becoming the band, and then like there's going to be like a 5th movie of the Beat? Like, this is the stupidest idea I've ever heard.
In my head, I want Paul McCartney to play a Nick Fury character and show up at the end of each movie. It's like, would you like to talk about the Beatles initiative?
I'm putting a band together. Oh my, that would be hilarious.
But just looking at the concept that someone thought, okay, we could make a Beatles biopic movie. It's been done. People make biopics about world-renowned musicians all the time.
Queen, We Will Rock You.
Bohemian Rhapsody.
Was it called Bohemian Rhapsody?
Yes.
Okay, never mind. Maybe that's why I can't find it.
That's why I've never seen the stupid thing. But
continue.
You have the idea, which is fine. People like those movies. They want to see the origin of the Beatles. Why would you think to make 4 different movies
from 4 different perspectives
and then put them together to make a culmination movie of these characters? Like,
this sounds like an idea for like a satire biopic.
Literally. Like it sounds like someone took the MCU and was like, what if we made a biopic out of that format?
Like, it sounds like this would be the sequel to This Is Spinal Tap.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they would do one for each individual band member, and then they came together. Doesn't that sound like that's what that would be?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, man.
So you have either just this oversaturation where you can watch almost anything you can think of, genuinely. Not going to say it's good, but there's a movie about sharks flying in a very fast circle in the sky. Like, we have gone to some branches in our media outlets here.
It's a masterpiece. It's Shakespearean in quality.
Hey, no one can say that we have let Shakespeare down with the movies that we've made. I mean, Jack and Jill, he'd probably weep watching that.
I don't doubt that he would. But please, you were on Sharknado.
See, but you take a movie like that, and it's a B movie. It's very outlandish.
Is it?
You're right. It's top tier, top of Hollywood. But when you can watch anything, it almost feels like anything you do watch, you could have already seen it before, or the next thing I watch is going to be the same thing. If I'm in the mood for a thriller, it's not that I want to go back and watch this like really well put together movie like Shutter Island or something where you don't know what the twist is. It's not straightforward. There's a lot on the bone for you to chew through for that movie. Now it's just like, oh, you want to watch a thriller? Get on Netflix. There's going to be a whole 14 pages of thriller movies we can put on. And I guarantee you, for every 3 that are on there, they're probably pretty much the same movie with different actors, different budget. But this one has a female villain, and this one, it's a possessed child. Like,
and I think, like, out of the recent movies, I think the only ones that I have really paid attention to, let myself get immersed in them, let myself, like, just really home in on what's happening, is the John Wick series. And I think there's twofold to that. That one, the action is almost nonstop no matter which movie that you're watching, that like things can happen so quickly that like you need to stay on, because there's a lot of like, I think people underestimate the amount of storytelling that is done through those fights a lot of times. And second, when they do talk, there's a much more layered dialogue than most action movies have these days. Like, I keep going back to the end of 4, that we talked about this, that when after the duel, spoilers,
you don't know who won. You just know there was a duel.
That after the duel, after he had been shot in the stomach, and he turned to Winston and he said, "Winston, you'll take me home." And Winston looked down at the wound and just said, "Of course, Jonathan." Like, at that point, I knew John was dead. Because why would he be asking Winston to take him home? So, like, the dialogue was deceptively layered for it being a movie about a dude seeking revenge for his dead dog. I mean, when you get right down to it, like, on paper, that's what it is. But this world they created, this mythology they created around the table, around John himself, like, you had to pay attention because you didn't want to miss anything. And I really feel like those are the first movies in a very long time. And once again, I didn't binge watch them. I had the opportunity. I spaced them out. So like, I think there was like a week to a week and a half between each movie. And then since you hadn't seen the 4th one, I waited until we could watch the 4th one together instead of just movie. And I think that honestly had a lot to do. Because when you binge, whether you realize it or not, you get fatigued on it. You stop paying attention.
And that's been a very real thing for me. Oh, the past, I don't know, 2 years is something I've slowly realized. Because it wasn't something that I just like was watching a show and I felt myself looking away and I was like, oh, I'm binging. I shouldn't do that. It was something that took a lot of thought that I didn't even actually get to the realization. You were the one that had the realization that made me realize it, and it was because of Avatar. When you realized that and you explained everything, and then I started thinking about some of the shows, movies that I've watched, and it was the exact same thing of like, well, I'm really not retaining the stuff I'm watching. And that actually sat poorly with me. Because, I mean, surprise, surprise, on a podcast like this, we actually quite enjoy the stuff that we're consuming, movie, media, movie, film, music.
Yeah.
Like, we
video games
legitimately really like those things. It's a form of escapism. But even more than that, from our perspective, we understand what goes into that. Maybe not video games. I don't know about him. I haven't designed one yet. But... you know, I've made short films. He's directed shows on stage and whatnot. He has a whole YouTube channel.
Shows you've been in.
Yes, shows I have been in. So we have been in the creative process, and we've been in it from different perspectives on different mediums. So it is nice to see a show and look at things like, oh man, they really put the lighting in this shot to make it so that half of his face is dark, half of his face is light. Well, what is that meaning? What's the symbolism there? Like, that's the stuff me and him really sink our teeth into when we're watching stuff. And that is intriguing to me. That is fun to figure out what they may have been trying to do with this scene, even though this scene was really just the Crow coming and talking to the detective in his apartment. Like, there really wasn't much that happens in that scene besides a conversation.
Well, he also gets the thing that saves him at the end.
Well, yeah, the
Yeah,
memory thing,
yeah.
but like that wasn't a plan. He didn't go there
right,
thinking,
right.
I'm going to do this and have this like in my head. He went there just to have a conversation.
Yes.
And that's all that scene really was.
Yeah.
Was a conversation between these two characters. But so much happens in that scene. The staging of how they're sitting next to each other, how they're these enemies in the movie, but really they're two humans who are relating to each other on a very emotional, very real front of reality. But you could miss all that if you're just glancing up at the movie and it's like, oh yeah, he just showed up to talk to the detective and then he went and killed some people.
Well, and it's not just us that misses the point a lot of times. Like, we've talked about this with the remake of The Crow, that, like, I really feel like they are missing the point with the remake. But then one that we also talked about today, actually, time of recording, I just showed him the original RoboCop for the first time. And we briefly talked about the sequels, and he asked me how those were. And I said the sequels and the remake are bad, mainly because the directors that took over the reins pretty much completely missed the point of the first movie, and they just tried to franchise it. So let me go back to the first time I ever started binging something, okay? Me and my friends were really into Supernatural, but we were so wrapped up in the story that we hated waiting the week to week, okay? So what we would do is we would just not watch the season at all, and we waited until the DVDs came out. And we would sit there as a group and watch it and binge watch for the first time before that was a thing to do on streaming. Because one of my friends, Kat, even said, I really like watching it this way. We don't have to wait anymore. And because we were so into Supernatural, and we only watched up to season 5, I just want to make that clear. The true ending of the show. But we did retain everything because that was our show, because that was like the one that like we wanted to see. That it kind of snuck up on even me, that it wasn't until recently when we had this conversation that I realized I have glossed over so much because of just been binge watching it. Like Supernatural, those first 5 seasons, I can still tell you when things happened, the name of people, when demons took over the brothers, when they didn't, when they got the tattoos, all of that stuff, because I was invested in it. I watched it, even though we were watching it all at once. Now, I'm lucky if I remember the name of the show sometimes, because one that we've talked about, when I binge watched Full Metal Alchemist, I watched the
Brotherhood.
No,
right?
no. I want
no,
no.
you-
Remember,
yeah,
this
that's
is
right,
what the
that's
whole
right.
thing is. I didn't realize Brotherhood was out when I watched Full Metal, and I watched the entire series of Full Metal and then found out about Brotherhood. But there were things that happened in Full Metal that I was just like, I am not submitting myself to this immediately. So even now, as I'm gearing myself up to watch Brotherhood, like, I'm realizing I really don't remember most of that show. I remember the traumatic moments. I remember the Chimera moments. I remember...
The girl and her dog.
Yeah, I remember...
Everyone remembers the girl and her dog. Jesus.
I remember, like, the stories, the backstories to Alphonse and, what is it, Elric?
Mm-hmm. No, they're the Elric brothers. It's Alphonse and Edward.
Edward?
That sounded wrong when I said it. Eric. No. Regardless.
Yes. So, like, I remember their... See, that's the thing. Like, I don't even remember their names right now. I remember Alphonse because he's a big walking suit of armor. But other than that, like, there are so many gaps. Like, I remember the dude that was like what was he, the Iron Alchemist or something, that was just jacked.
Yeah. Yeah. The dude with his one little tuffle of hair right in the front. Yeah.
But I don't remember any of the in between
Yeah.
that gets us between there. So like when I do finally watch Brotherhood, I've already decided I may watch like 2 or 3 episodes, wait a week, watch 2 or 3 more. I I am not retaining the way I used to, just because binge watching is affecting that. But going back to the original issue with movies, we don't have to. We know it's always going to be there. And if we can't remember something and we don't even want to watch a full episode, we can freaking look something up on Google. And we don't even have to read the Wikipedia anymore, because there's probably a video that says like Full Metal Alchemist ending explained.
Yeah. Like there's an entire YouTube channel called Endings Explained.
Yeah.
Like it just explains the ending to things if you don't understand how it ends.
Mm-hmm.
Which is cool to the degree of, like, if you legitimately did not understand why something ended the way that it did, that is a form of free discussion with other people that are involved in whatever that media is.
Mm-hmm.
But it also promotes laziness in a way. And I'm not saying you're lazy if you do not dissect everything you watch.
Right.
Look, I put on How I Met Your Mother because I don't want to dissect it. Like, there's crap made for that.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be able to watch something, a TV show, a movie, and dig into it, think about it. And if it's just you putting it on and it's just noise in the background, it doesn't matter what you put on at all. You could put on crappy reality TV, or you could put on Schindler's List. To you, that's the exact same thing. It's just something on the TV to pass the time. And that kind of sucks. Like, it sucks that we can treat media equal across the board of just, well, it's TV, who cares? Or, well, it's just music, who cares? Like, people can do so much with any of those mediums. And you can put so much in it, or you can make it as hollow as you possibly can. We've seen that throughout Hollywood's history of just cash grabs for anything. And if we didn't focus so much on franchises, on making everything the next billion-dollar idea. Like, one thing I said to him after we watched The Crow a while back, we watched RoboCop today. It's interesting to watch these movies from these directors who have very different ideals on how to approach things. Like, I don't agree with the guy, I don't know his name, he did RoboCop.
Vorhaven.
Vorhaven.
Yeah.
I don't agree with his approach of, like, not liking a franchise and only wanting to make one-off movies, but that's fine. Like, he created movies I would never create. He would create a movie that would tell a story that I couldn't tell because he just views it differently. And that means you could make movies for different audiences. The people that like RoboCop are not the same people that are going to like Barbie. It is what it is. Like, it doesn't have to all be for everyone all the time.
Right.
But if we just mass produce movies, every comedy is going to start to feel the same. Like,
Well,
comedy.
I feel like we're there, to be completely honest. I feel like we're there because, like, I feel like like I said, the reason I paid so much attention to John Wick is because, like, it's so involved, layered, different. But I really do have no desire to see most action movies these days because I really feel like they're all basically just a copy and paste of, and I don't want to keep harping on Marvel, but, like, I really feel like it's everybody saw Marvel made money, let's just copy and paste and do this. And The Expendables was supposed to be something that brought back, like, that action genre, and it went away because it basically just started becoming a copy of itself. Like, my biggest problem with that movie series isn't that, like, they brought back all of these old action stars to do a victory lap. I think that was awesome. I think that is a great premise for this. But the issue is, The name of the series is called The Expendables. They should have been losing people every movie.
But instead, each movie, their group has gotten bigger.
Yeah. Like,
Not very expendable.
no. No. Like,
And look, we're not saying titles are the law here. There's like 16 Mission Impossibles. At
Right.
some point, they're just not impossible. But yeah, like
they had a
could
chance
have-
they had an
yeah.
opportunity to do something, and they didn't.
Like, look, I get it. It's Sylvester Stallone's movies. He was probably not going to be the one to die. Mm-hmm. Fine. But then start just taking out some of the other ones. They don't all have to die at the end of the movie. Maybe start the next movie with some of them dying. Mm-hmm. Like, you still acknowledge them, bring them back for the second one for fun or the next one for fun. Mm-hmm. But, like, there's no need to just, oh, well, this is popular, so let's keep it going for as long as we possibly can. And then people can binge the entire series of The Expendables and miss nothing.
They're all basically the same at this point, because they even had like kids in there, like the kids of some of them, and it's like the Star Wars paradigm all over again. Like, you had this opportunity to move out the old guard and bring in like these new actors, build new action stars, but they didn't do that. They had a chance to like do something different. And like, it would have been very meta if like they would have taken each of these old action stars and just given them on-screen deaths and kind of retired them from the genre. You know what I mean? Like, they could have done so much, but like, it surprises me that Stallone did this, because this is the same guy that wrote the Rocky franchise that had so many main characters die off throughout the series of the franchise. And he didn't bring that same level to, like, it got to the point where like it was very obviously just like playground movies for him and his buddies. And
It started to feel like Grown-Ups, but for action movies.
yeah, no, that's what I was about to say. It felt like, Sandler made an action movie. Something else that, while we were sitting here talking about it, I think is connected to this, and this is something that we've both commented on, that going back to the whole, you don't need to immerse yourself in it. You don't need to retain it, because even if you see a movie in the movie theater, you're there just for the experience, to watch it on the big screen. Like I said, in 6 weeks, you can get it video on demand at home. In 2 months, you can get it in streaming or buy the Blu-ray. I also think this has led to, if people aren't sitting there and they're not immersed and they're not paying attention to the movie, this is why we have such crap movie ethics, movie etiquette anymore. That like, people aren't sitting there trying to retain or respecting other people's abilities. Because what was the one thing that you kind of like dogged on me for commenting on when we saw The Crow? Like, on the way home, I kept saying I was very proud of our audience.
Yeah. Yeah, it's because people didn't pull their phones out. They didn't scream and have loud conversations. It was kind of nice. I mean, it was The Crow re-released in theaters, so if you wanted to go see it, it was predominantly people who have already seen the movie. So it's people who innately want to be there.
Either they're like me, and they saw it in the theaters 30 years ago, and they realized, this is it, this is the last chance. Or it's an audience like you that have seen it, haven't had a chance to see it on the big screen. And yeah, tell me about that, because like, when I asked you if you wanted to go see it, I honestly didn't expect you to say yes. Like, what, you didn't even hesitate. Like, what made you want to go see it on the big screen?
Well, one, it doesn't actually have to do with The Crow itself. I enjoy going to the movie theater. Before the theater that closed down near us closed down, on Tuesdays they did half ticket night.
Yeah.
So every Tuesday after college and work, I would leave directly from my job and drive straight to the movie theater, because I would get done at my job at 10 and the last viewing was 10:30.
Okay.
So I would drive and immediately go straight there and buy whatever ticket I could for whatever viewing was at the end of the night. And half the time it was a movie I had never heard about, didn't see a trailer, didn't know anything about. I'd go in there and watch the movie by myself. I didn't care.
I was gonna say now at that time of day on a Thursday, I'm betting it was like you and maybe two other
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
Like sometimes there were some other people in there. Sometimes I was just completely by myself, which was nice and also a little creepy sometimes. But like the theater experience in and of itself, I've always really enjoyed because the whole theater experience is sit down, focus on this movie. We're going to give you the best experience. And I love that because I want to be fully enthralled by a movie. So any opportunity to go see a movie that I know is good in that setting, I'm going to say yes. But I did want to see that in a bigger screen.
Okay.
I don't think I'd ever go out of my way myself to have gone and seen it like that because I think honestly I would have assumed the tickets were very expensive and I wouldn't have looked into it. But no, it genuinely, it's just I really like going to theaters. I like the experience. Like I like talking to the people there. That was one thing that became nice because I would go almost every week. Not that I was like close with the people
Right.
there, but I could go there and they'd be like, "Oh, how you doing this week?" And I'm like, here to go see whatever movie this is." And then they'd be like, "Oh yeah, that's a good one," or "Oh, you're okay." And granted, I did see some bad movies. Like, not the worst movie ever, nothing that even really retained with me, but there were movies that I left and I was like, I could have gone without that movie. But then there were other ones that blew me away because I had no expectation. Like, I wasn't going in thinking, oh, this is a great movie or going to be a great movie. I knew nothing. The one that Jeff Bridges was in it and Chris Hemsworth, along with some others, but those are the two I remember. It was like Bad Times at the old Royale or the Grand Royale. The entire movie takes place at this hotel.
Yeah.
I loved that movie. I thought it was so cool, so interesting. I'm not saying it was groundbreaking, but from just not knowing anything, I was fully into the movie. And I've never really seen anyone talk about it. I've never really seen anyone review it. So I don't know. To me, that was my isolated incident of going and seeing a movie, and it turned out really good, and it felt like no one else had seen it.
Okay.
So, like, I don't have that anymore, though. I'm kind of jumping off your question with this part, but like that theater experience is gone. Even from the theater experience you used to have to the theater experience I used to have, neither one of them exist anymore.
No.
There is no joy in going to the theater because you're either going to get gouged on tickets, you're going to get gouged on the food, guaranteed, or you're just going to be in a room full of people that I'm not even sure even want to actually be there.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
And that's not to say you can't react to what you're watching or talk to your friend about when something happens. But if you're talking over several scenes and you are just constantly being a nuisance, that's the problem.
This whole like non-theater etiquette, like it's not just you in your living room.
Yeah.
Like you are affecting other people's enjoyment, other people that have spent a lot of money to come see this, that have spent money to come see this. It doesn't matter how much they've spent money. And it's just arrogant to assume that it's all about you. But like I said, back in 94 when we went to see The Crow, even if it was a bad movie, like we still paid attention because one, you just didn't do that in theaters. Two, we're here. You know what I mean? Like if we didn't like it that much, we would just get up and walk out. Okay. But now, like we keep saying, like the whole premise of this topic, the whole premise of this episode, you'll see it again in 6 weeks. You'll see it again in 2 months. Like, they don't care.
It's almost hard to even be the person upset about them doing stuff because on our end, it's still like, I'll wait 3 months and watch it at home and see the scene I missed.
Yeah.
Like, and that sucks, but half the time that's better than sitting there and trying to tell them to stop talking.
Oh, I don't feel that. I don't feel that at all. I will tell somebody to shut up.
I know you will.
I was fully cocked, locked, and ready to rock if anybody started acting up during The Crow.
And he said that going into it. That's not a... He was fully prepared.
Especially when we saw that herd of kids and I thought they were coming in to see the movie. You have to understand, as soon as we got out of the car and we were walking up to the theater, what walked in front of us was like a mom that was like my age and like 3 kids that ranged between like 8 and 12. And I just looked at them and said, no. And I wasn't subtle about it. And he starts cracking up and he's like, there are other movies being shown tonight.
It wasn't just us.
So I know it may seem like we veered off topic a little bit, but there is one thing, there is one final thing that we wanted to talk about. More specifically, Uncle Britt wanted to talk about. So
for those of you who don't know, there is a show called The Boys on Prime Video. And not getting into the details of the show or anything, but for those of you who don't know, it is a show about what superheroes would be like if they were just bad people. Like if you took Superman and made him like Elon Musk or something, like just making them gritty reality people that have major flaws. So you have this show that is superheroes but evil. And the main character, Homelander, does just terrible, terrible things in the show. Like, legitimately bad things to just regular people. Mm-hmm. Murder, rape, espionage, using his superpowers to get whatever he wants kind of crap. And then you have the people that watch this show. People who, I'm just going to frankly say, do not have media literacy. Because they watch this show... and they think Homelander is the hero for standing up for himself, for standing up to these corporations. And then you have the actor who plays Homelander has come out in interviews and said, if you watch this show and you think my character, Homelander, is the hero, you need to watch a different show. Like, you are wrong for thinking that way about this character. And then you might think, okay, well, that's just the actor. The creator of the show has come out and said, if you think...
The showrunner, the guy who created it, was the one that started the comic.
Yes.
So he's the showrunner and the director, who, actually, interesting enough, was the showrunner and creator of Supernatural.
Yeah.
Kripke.
Mm-hmm. And he has come out and said, if you think Homelander is the hero, you're wrong, and you need to watch a different show. They're not saying it to be funny. They're saying it because if you watch this show and think the main villain who does the worst things in the show is the hero, you aren't understanding what you're watching. You're not even picking up the plot that it's giving you. And it's not that it's subtle. It's not that it's nuanced. It is such an over-the-top show to show you that he's the villain, for you to look at him and say, oh, this guy's the hero. That's like watching Breaking Bad and thinking Walter White was right. No! You're just wrong. And it... This just ties into where we started with this. When you watch something, when you consume something, be aware of what you're watching. Because, one, you might miss what it's actually telling you, but on the far worse side of that, you might misconstrue the message. And if you misconstrue the message, just like, Top Gun inspired people to be pilots, this movie might inspire you to go out and act that way because you saw in this show when you act confident and bully people around, you get what you want. You have to be aware of what you're consuming, and you have to be aware outside of yourself to talk to other people about the same thing you're consuming. Mm-hmm. Like, people have to be aware of what media is feeding you and what you're consuming. It is so important to be aware of what you yourself are taking in, that if you just take in anything and everything at face value, for lack of a better term, you are very superficial.
Yeah. So, our takeaway for today's episode is be aware of what you're watching. In my personal opinion, don't binge watch an entire series at once. I do believe that you will get a better experience out of it if you force yourself to put in waiting periods between watching episodes. Don't just like try and consume everything for the first time all at once. And please be cool in theaters.
Yes. And we're not saying you have to wait a week between an episode of a show you really love.
Give yourself time to digest it and think about it.
Watch 2, 3, 4 episodes of something. I mean, heck, anime's 22 minutes long. You can watch 4 episodes. That's less than 2 hours. That's fine. Or you could watch Supernatural. That's 45 minutes. Watch 2, 3 episodes of that. But then, like, walk away. Take a day. Take 2 days and just digest what you've watched. 2 days later, pick it right back up. Watch 3 more episodes. It's just give yourself the width and process, or the processing space to understand what you're consuming without just consuming it for the goal of getting through it.
I'm Mac. You can find me at Brickentire on Instagram and YouTube.
I'm Uncle Britt, and you can find me at Uncle_Britt on Instagram or TikTok.
Thank you for joining us, and this has been Ralph World.
Ralph World.